Hey guys, Tyler here, and I've got a two-part episode to share with you. First, I want to have a discussion about the big role that survival skills and technical knowledge play in emergency preparedness. Then, we'll head out into the woods where I made a video sharing some of my experience with collecting dry firewood on a rainy day. I'll have a summary for that section right here. Otherwise, discussion about prepping tends to focus on either the threats that we perceive to our everyday lives or the things that we physically do to prepare against those threats, like purchasing gear and supplies. But all the things in the world won't help you if you lack the proper skills and mentality to adapt to any given challenge. And what's more, tragedy can strike at any minute and take everything from you but your own abilities and determination. So, how you adapt to challenges and your mental resources for overcoming those challenges are the key factors for success in the face of adversity. That's why your mentality will always be a prominent discussion topic here on this channel. And it's also why I'm committed to sharing practical skills, which I call Fieldcraft, in dedicated episodes. So, in that vein, let's talk about emergency firewood collection.
All right, it was very windy when I needed to film, so I chose to simply capture my footage and perform this voiceover. It may look really nice in a few clips here, but it was very rainy that day and the days preceding, so everything out here should be pretty moist. Now, my goal in this video is not to share how to build a fire yet, but just to share some tips for collecting wood in a survival situation, which means fuel that is ready to burn at low cost in energy and time. In a survival situation, time is too precious to ever dedicate to just one task like wood collection. Prioritizing firewood collection can cause injury, loss of direction, both physically and mentally, and squander time that would be better spent appropriating water or shelter. So, foraging tasks like wood and food collection should always be opportunistic and performed secondary to major tasks like signaling, finding water or shelter, and travel if that is a safe and viable option. But you should always remember that when lost in the wild, most of the time you'll have your best chances of outside rescue by staying put and signaling. Remember that in a survival situation, your needs are different than when camping, and so your fire configuration and your fuel collection needs will also be different. Again, it's important to not become so focused on any one task that you find yourself running out of daylight for others. So we're looking for firewood while we're providing for shelter or water, but not as its own task unless we're confident that it is now the priority. The biggest hurdle in starting a fire is igniting a steady flame. Once you have this, you are able to dry and ignite larger pieces of fuel. Tinder is what you call the fine pieces of readily flammable materials used to start a fire. Dry tinder and other small fuel materials are easily accumulated in large quantities if you know how to identify them. And this involves knowing which sources to ignore. Let's take a look at some examples of fuel sources that I would pass over in the early stages of fuel collection. Now, please keep in mind that this footage is not being brought to you by a crew with a Steadicam. It's being brought to you by a dude in the woods with a camera. So thank you for bearing with me. Let's get to it. Just because wood is easy to get to does not mean you want to use it. Rotten wood is no good, and moisture accelerates rotting, so anything in contact with the ground is pretty much out of the question, as well as anything that looks dead but is supporting other green growth, like tree shoots or moss. While it may be dry, it will produce more smoke than heat and is no good for propagating a fire. We want to pass over anything that looks dead, but has limbs which are springy and supple. Seasoned wood is usually brittle when dry. Unfortunately, there isn't much rain cover in nature, especially in an area like mine where broadleaf trees aren't abundant. I did find some nice bushes with dry twigs underneath, and against my expectations, I did find a few rocky outcroppings, usually most of the way up a hill where the bedrock is exposed under the topsoil. Now, while I did find more of these areas that were covered by rocky outcroppings than I expected to, I didn't necessarily find a lot of very useful wood in them, and I probably passed up more useful wood to get there. So for these reasons, it's probably more important to simply look for the dry wood that's right in front of you. Now, no matter how dry a log is, I will usually ignore larger chunks of wood at first, since I'm trying to start a small fire without a lot of initial work. But stumps like this one and its log, which are propped up on foliage, are likely to be dry, well seasoned sources of wood. What's more, the wood near the base of a tree is often called fat wood because it is filled with dried sap or pitch, which makes it burn more readily and hotter than limb wood. The shattered ends of a snag, for this reason, are often a great source of kindling and tinder as they hang in the wind and dry quickly. So, to whittle down the subject of emergency firewood collection, we're looking for a large amount of small bits of dry wood while doing more important tasks so that we can start a fire hot enough to burn some of the rest of this stuff. Well, thanks for tuning in for another episode of Let's Talk About Prepping. I hope that you either found this entertaining or helpful and that you'll tune in for future installments. Have a good day.